everyone, and welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. We are so glad you joined us today. I am Kari, your host, and I am joined with a friend, Thaddeus, who is a friend of mine, but a friend of the podcast as well. He's a supporter on the Patreon group, and we just had a lot of fun talking Hallmark and getting to know each other over our mutual love for Hallmark. So, Thaddeus, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Great, and thanks for having me on again today. I'm really looking forward to discussing this movie.
Me too. Me too. Now, how many times have you been on the podcast?
I think this is my third time. I think I did one Lifetime Christmas recap, and then
Nice.
with Rachel and I think it was Amy, and then I did another back in the spring where we did this recap of the spring movies with
Okay.
Rachel and. I forgot the name of the other young lady that I was on with, but we had a really good time discussing spring movies. So
It's such a good time.
mhm.
I love it. So are you all ready for Christmas? Are you like decorated and everything?
No. I'm about to start that process and then start my Christmas shopping. I like to try to get my Christmas shopping at least like 2 weeks before
Yes.
Christmas, so that I'm not rushing at the end.
Yeah.
So I think probably, within the next, week or so, I'll probably start and finish my Christmas
Good
shop.
job.
Yeah.
Nice. That is great. I know I like to have that goal too. I like to start even before Thanksgiving, but I'm always rushing for
Mhm.
something at the end. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but I just always am. But okay, no, this is great. I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. Now, for those of you who join us, I'm so glad that you did, but we are jumping networks. We are changing the channel. We are not talking about a Hallmark movie. We are talking about a Lifetime Christmas movie, Kirk
Mhm.
Franklin's A Gospel Christmas.
Yes.
So I know I'm so excited. Okay, when I saw this, because I'm a pretty loyal Hallmark watcher, honestly. Like, I don't have time to watch the hundreds of Christmas movies that are being produced in the world today. You know,
You're not like
so many.
oh,
I know. I even think like
every year.
every year there's more every year. People want to get in on this game. But so it's like either Hallmark or Lifetime, but even Lifetime is like when I can. But
Hmm.
when I saw that this was happening,
Hmm.
I was like, Kirk Franklin's A Gospel Christmas, get this on my TV right now. I love this idea.
Yeah.
What did you think? What drew you to this movie?
So, I mean, I grew up on gospel music. Pretty much actually growing up, I was pretty much only allowed to listen to gospel music.
Really?
And of course, so I have been familiar with Kirk Franklin going back into my childhood from
Yes.
like Kirk Franklin and the Family, and then
Yep.
when he kind of went into like the more kind of contemporary
Mhm.
gospel music that was actually
Mhm.
kind of controversial at the time with like the song Stomp and all of the like more like produced things that he did, and
Yeah.
how he kind of really revolutionized what contemporary gospel music
Yes.
sounded like. It was very exciting for some people and very kind of off-putting to some like more traditional minded people. And
Yeah.
he really took that risk and
Yeah.
kind of paved the way for other people in gospel music to experiment with the sound a bit more. So I've always respected him for that. I've
Yes.
seen I've seen him live a few times and have
Oh,
enjoyed that.
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
was as soon as I saw Kirk Franklin, I was like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this movie. And, I'm hoping that, they really let him, do Kirk Franklin.
Right. Right.
So,
Because he is, I mean, with 25 years plus experience in the music industry and everything that he has added,
mhm,
brought to the music industry. And like you said, the doors he's opened for even other gospel artists. And um, he's so influential, and he's really been a part of a lot of people's spiritual journey.
mhm,
So mine too, and I love him, but I love his message that he's been so consistent to bring. It's just a part of him, but it's this gospel message. He is about the gospel. So
mhm,
I really love that. I appreciate that. And so what I was thinking with this movie, I was like, he's going to take us to church, and
mhm,
he's going to bring the music, and he's going to bring the worship, and this is just going to be so good. So
mhm.
I was so looking forward to that. um I have to say, even before we start, he delivered.
Yeah.
This was a fantastic movie. I thought it was amazing.
So I really enjoyed it as well. So
Yeah.
I'm I'm really looking forward to like going in depth on like the things that I, really liked with
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, let's jump in then. Let's jump into Kirk Franklin's A Gospel Christmas on Lifetime. It was aired on Lifetime December 4th, and it was starring Demetria McKinney as Olivia, Chaz Lamar Shepard as Ashton. The script was written by Courtney Richard, and it was directed by Erica Sutherland. So here's the synopsis. This movie follows Olivia, a young assistant pastor, as she deals with the transition to be a lead pastor at a new church a month before Christmas, and finds a little romance along the way, which she totally did. I mean, this was a church movie, and the
Mhm,
storyline was about this winter jamboree, all of this stuff, but it was a great romance.
mhm.
So I loved that part of it. But let's talk about the storyline. Okay, so the script was great.
Mhm.
This Courtney Richard. Now I'm saying Richard. I don't know
Mhm.
if it's Richard or Richard. Do you know?
No, but so we'll just say Rashard for now.
Let's just say Richard because she wrote the script and the main character's last name was Richard, like Richard, and that's how they said it. So I'm just like assuming that she just kind of did a little nod to herself here,
Mhm.
which is great.
Yeah.
But we have Olivia, who
Mhm.
is an associate pastor at her mom's church,
Mhm.
who is a singing pastor there, and she gets commissioned to go and be a lead pastor, a senior
Mhm.
pastor in Texas at a
Right.
little church in need there.
Mhm.
She was not told that she was going. What did you think about that?
I was like, what, 2 days? You want her to pack up her things and be in Texas in 2 days, just completely, like I said, pack up all her stuff and just start. I mean, and obviously, like she was very kind of hesitant about it, and didn't really have complete confidence in herself, and that was kind of a theme throughout the movie, which I thought was really interesting. And I think that I think her mother probably knew her and knew that if she had given her too much time to think about it, she probably would have backed out. So I
That's
think
a
that's
good point.
why she was like, "Yeah, you got to go."
Yeah, yeah, you can't think of this. You got to go. You got to trust God's will through me. Like, just
Yeah.
go. Yeah. That is such a good point because she was comfortable where she
Hmm.
was in the job that she had, being her mom's associate pastor, but
Hmm.
she had such potential for leadership. And
Right.
so she just kind of was pushed into the deep end there with
Yep.
that, which was great. But yeah, so much was happening in this movie, but because the script was so good and so cleverly written, you didn't feel like it was too clunky with so too many storylines. Like it all
Mhm.
flowed in so well
I
together.
agree. Yeah. And I really enjoyed like some of the themes that they kind of tied in. Particularly like, they talk about like being a PK or a preacher's kid and like
Yes.
expectations that places on the preacher's kids because everybody, especially in a bigger church, is looking
Yeah.
at you, expecting you to follow
Yeah.
in your parents' footsteps, and that puts so much pressure on her.
Yeah.
And then they talked about like church hurt, which is like
Sure.
which is something that it really hurts a lot more. So particularly because particularly in the African American community, the
Yeah.
church has kind of been like a haven, a safe haven, a safe
Mhm.
place to go, and where you can be among like-minded people that are supportive, that love
Yeah.
you. And so when someone in the church does something to hurt you, it
Yeah.
just like any kind of betrayal, it hurts the worst from people that you trust and love. And so we have her, the experience that she has as a child, the first time that she sings a solo, and how that kind of completely traumatized her, and how
Yeah.
much of an impact that had on her life moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of her fear of
Yes.
stepping in as the go-to like lead pastor of a
Yeah.
church. And I thought that was really interesting, and I
So
think
good.
they did a really good job of kind of tying that in throughout the scripts. And I think the actress did a really good job of kind of portraying that sense
Yeah.
of like self-doubt, but then when you see her when she's preaching and how
She
much,
was so good.
yes, it's like, and then when she finally does sing,
Yeah.
you know, really she's extremely talented, and so so I really enjoyed
Yeah.
how well that was kind of played throughout. It wasn't just, it was something that we kind of had little reminders of, but it wasn't like banging you on the head over, with it over and over again. So I really like that. I think that the writer did an excellent job with the
I do
script.
too. Thaddeus, I'm glad you brought that up because that was a major theme for her growth and her character development
Mhm.
from, just being pushed into the deep end there, but how she really does start to trust the Lord and start to use her gifts and talents then
Mhm.
for the good of the church. But she totally grows in that. And
Mhm.
you just said something that was, I just thought was really great. Oh, her story.
Mhm.
So let's talk about this. She comes from a long line of singing pastors. So
Mhm.
here's this thing, like you said, in the African American church, a singing pastor. So it's
Mhm.
not just a pastor, the choir does their thing and then the pastor comes up, opens the word and then preaches. But
Mhm.
a singing pastor does all of it, right? Does both.
Yeah. And I think, so nowadays, usually most churches, especially larger churches, have like a worship leader that comes in and does that. But, and so, of
But
course, with,
these were
yeah,
smaller kind of
yeah, so this is
congregations.
a
Mhm.
smaller church that probably wouldn't be able to afford to have someone to come in for that. So I think that they kind of needed a singing pastor to
Yes.
be able to, kind of, prepare the atmosphere for the word on Sunday, and usher people in to the
Yeah.
church. I think that, so it kind of made sense once I thought about it, because at first I was like, okay, why does it have to be a singing pastor?
Right.
And a tiny church in a tiny town. They don't have too many people, so it made a bit
Yeah.
more sense that they were insistent upon having a singing preacher. Yeah.
That is a good point. Yes, I think you're exactly right on that because I thought, well, maybe it's just a preference, maybe it's something they've always done. And even for her mom to be so insistent, like Pastor Olivia or her daughter Olivia, you are a singing pastor. This is your heritage.
Mhm.
She was like kind of hesitant and resistant to that because she had this traumatic event as a 15-year-old. She sang a solo, and the
Mhm.
choir director of that church at the time said to her afterwards, you like basically like you're your mother's daughter and that's the best you could do. Like
Mhm.
she totally shames her, totally shuts her down, does not accept her worship and her leading. And it just like that was it for her. She was not going to sing again. She was not going to be a singing pastor. And with tears, I was totally crying because then this guy, Ashton, that she's talking to, does come back and say, church hurt is real. And he
Mhm.
just acknowledges it and he looks at her and he affirms that feeling like, yeah, church hurt is real. Like that was so authentic, I
Yeah.
think, this
Yeah. Agree.
storyline. It was awesome.
Mhm.
So good.
And I was really happy that they actually like went there in the script, because usually in these kinds of,
Yeah.
that have like a faith-based message,
Yeah.
they either like water it down so that they don't really delve deep into it, and they spend
Yeah.
more time on other aspects of the story,
Yeah.
or they just like beat you over the head with the faith message and don't really develop a good story. And
Right.
in this one, they had a good story, and they also mixed in the faith message in an organic way,
Yeah.
because it was what she believed. This was
Yeah.
who she was,
Yeah.
and they have to include that because it's so important to her character.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which I so appreciated because that's what made it feel so very authentic. She is a pastor. So of course she's going to sit down at her kitchen table with her Bible open, or with like and say scripture out loud and stuff like that. Like that is who she is. That is not just her vocation, but it's her belief system and who she is. So such a great character. So she did it so seamlessly, like you said. I appreciated that so much.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. Sometimes love needs a little push. Lizzie Shane, the award-winning author of The 12 Dogs of Christmas, has a brand new small-town romance set in Pine Hollow, Vermont, where every happily ever after begins with adopting an adorable rescue dog.
First love gets a second chance into All the Dogs I've Loved Before when the town librarian, mischievous Australian Shepherd, keeps getting loose and fetching her ex, the town sheriff.
Lizzie Shane's Pine Hollow series has been called an irresistible blend of heart, humor, and a whole lot of puppy love.
And To All the Dogs I've Loved Before is available now wherever books are sold.
To learn more, visit www.lizzieshane.com.
That's LizzieShane.com.
The best, especially in a made-for-TV movie, to that they ever like really done like a faith-based message or included that in the story. I think, and that's the most seamlessly I've seen it included in a made-for-TV movie. Definitely.
Yeah. Well done, Courtney Richard. Well done. We applaud you on that. So we have this young pastor who comes in, and a month before Christmas, she has to jump in and learn this church's Christmas traditions, kind of uphold some of these old traditions, new traditions. You know, what she inherits really here at this church is a grieving congregation. You know, their beloved Pastor Bird has passed away, and really you find some characters very hesitant to accept her, and others just really arms open wide. They are there to support her. But I mean, that's a hard job. That's going to be a hard job. She does great.
And chief among the kind of naysayers was it Sister Ida, who was the late pastor's sister. And I think she was, feeling very protective about those traditions. And I'm not quite sure who she was looking for to replace him. I don't think she wanted to replace him. I think maybe she was kind of like in denial about her brother's death and kind of want to see anybody replace him. But she was very kind of oppositional towards Olivia.
So much.
Just like, gave her a hard time pretty much from start until the very, very, very end of the movie. It was difficult to see, and Olivia was, polite and respectful. I think a little bit too polite and respectful.
Sometimes.
That passed his office until she wasn't going to be. I mean, I know Sister Ida kept remind her this is on a trial basis, and if you don't get this thing together, then you're not going to be here. But until that trial was over, she was the pastor. So you would think that especially a pastor's sister would have a little bit more respect for that office. But like they said, they made a point of showing that she was really grieving. She had been very close to her brother, and so we had her.
Oh, sorry. Don't you think that the congregation, like the people who loved Sister Ida and they loved Pastor Bird too, they really were helping her. I mean, they were a little forgiving of her rudeness sometimes, but they kept saying she's grieving, she's grieving, like give her time, she's grieving. And I thought that was kind of sweet. They knew she had it better in her, like give her time, she's grieving.
And they even, made that reminder, like, that toy drive that they did. It was set up by Sister Ida because she just saw one child that was in need. I believe she was homeless or something. And so she kind of set up this toy drive for her and then for all of the kind of local people that were in need. So it was a good way to remind us of like the generosity and the goodness of her, in her character that we weren't seeing because of, her struggling with her brother and pastor's death.
Yes, brother and pastor. What a good point, because this man, there was a multifaceted relationship she had with her brother and pastor. So I thought it was funny in that toy drive scene how Pastor Olivia was always like, okay, wait, Sister Ida started this, and she just kind of couldn't believe that there was a sweetness to Sister Ida at all. But then she did warm up to her, and at the end, that was so precious to see her worshiping to see her accepting of Pastor Olivia, not worshiping Olivia, but in the worship set. So
Right.
that was cool to see her soften, because you knew she would. It
Yeah.
just
Eventually.
took her a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so the huge conflict here. This church has a choir who always participates in the community winter jamboree,
Mhm.
and Pastor Olivia forgets to turn in the paperwork. This is
Mhm.
like the most important thing to do in order to get in this contest. Or not contest, but like show. You can't even participate if you don't do the paperwork.
Mhm.
She forgot,
Right.
totally messes up, totally lets everyone down. That hurt my heart for her.
Yeah.
I was like,
Oh yeah. He was like, "Oh, it's over now. I'm gonna have to go with my tail between my legs, and
oh
and
man.
kind of really embarrassed that you're gonna be like, I'm sure she would have been deeply ashamed if she had to go back,
Oh yeah.
and they know that it was because the other church would not allow her to continue in that
Right.
office. That would have been, especially for her, because of her, issues with her self-confidence, that would have been a
Yes.
blow to her. So, but
Oh
thankfully, she is able to come up with a unique way
yes.
around that by finding another group that was already in the concert or the event that they could collaborate with.
Yes. Which I was glad for. It was a rock band.
Mhm.
And they were like, can we come in and bring the voices? Because they don't sing, they just played music. And everyone was like, what? Mixing rock and roll? What are you doing? I can't, that's not done. That's not how we do it. They probably don't want us there either. And they have this great conversation in Olivia's office
Mhm.
about, you know, Brother Carl says something about, oh, well, let's just think about like Prince for a little Prince of Peace, or like he's trying to like tap these phrases that he like marries the two, rock and roll and gospel. And someone says, well, even Kirk Franklin had a rock and roll song, one
Yes,
time.
exactly. Like a very good nod to Kirk Franklin and how innovative he had been within gospel music by
Yes.
kind of mixing in styles from other genres.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really great nod to him. I think,
I know.
and another good instance of good writing by
Yes.
the screenwriter.
I totally agree. And because it felt like a total natural conversation, but like a great nod to him and his history, like you said. So they pull it off. They merge with this rock and roll band, and they have this beautiful opening song that they're practicing. Well, Sister Stella loses her voice.
Mhm.
She loses her voice. She can't go on. She can't sing. And they're like, who's gonna sing?
Mhm.
And they want their singing pastor to sing. But the reason why some people know that she can sing is, one, we have this great character named Ashton, who
Mhm.
he tried to make it as a musician, but he couldn't, I guess. So he came home and he's selling real estate. And Ashton is the love interest here,
Mhm.
who they have this great meet cute where they run into each other on the
Yeah.
church steps.
Yes.
And he says, what does he say? He said, oh, you're Pastor Richard?
Mhm.
I've been waiting for you. I mean, the church has been waiting for you.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for you. Which is so cute. What did you think of this character, Ashton?
So I really liked his character, and I think he had a nice, kind of a little minor arc as well. But he, was mainly there as like a support to her and to kind of help push her forward. But
Yeah.
we talked about his history where he had gone to Houston to
Yes.
try to break into the music industry, and it didn't work
Mhm.
out. So he went to real estate, came back. And he had, I guess, prior to going to Houston, I guess he had been a musician for the church.
Oh,
And
yeah.
but because of his failure to really make a name for himself in the music industry,
Mhm.
he is reluctant to go back to playing. And so you have this really nice scene where he takes her to a house that has a piano. We see him playing and singing,
Yeah.
and she kind of pushes him back into that leadership role because the gentleman who had been the choir director just, that was not really what he felt like he should be doing or wanted to do. He just wanted to sing in the tenor section.
He wanted to be a tenor.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
was very relieved and pleased when Ashton stepped back into that role as the musician and the choir director, and he did a very good job. And like I said, I really enjoyed like the friendship that they developed through the course of the movie, and how he was constantly encouraging her, and how she kind of gradually opens up to him about her trauma, and about her self-doubt that again occurs with like preachers' kids, about like measuring up to your other. And what I really liked about that is we see how much she really admires her mother, and for what she's done, and she just like, my mother's so good at this, and I don't think I'll ever measure up. But yeah, so I really enjoyed their relationship. I think it was a little interesting, like because the actors in real life are only like 2 years apart. But he looks like his age, maybe a little older than his age, and she looks a good bit younger than her age.
Right.
So I was like, oh, okay. But I did like them together, and I really thought that their romance was well written. I thought it was kind of funny. She sees him with the other woman, who turns out to be his little sister, who was coming back down to visit. That was kind of funny. But yeah, I really enjoyed their relationship.
Me too. I thought they had great chemistry, and they actually in this movie went on like 4 intentional dates. And so by the time that
we don't get dates in these kinds of movies.
I was like, he is amazing. He's like getting her out. He's totally asking her on dates, like getting right in. But so then by the time we have this happily ever after moment, at the end, I believe it. I'm like, they know each other well enough. Yeah, they've spent time together. They've challenged each other and confided in each other and laughed with each other. Like, and they had these like romantic feelings for each other already. You could tell even though they had this great friendship they were developing. I mean, they knocked it out of the park for me with this, the believability of their relationship. And it was very sweet. He took her to this park. He recreated a date that his dad took his mom on, I think, at a park, and set up a picnic and stuff. But he said his dad did it because he was broke and he didn't want his mom to know that he was broke. And so he just tried to make it romantic. And Ashton said, he like bumped it up a little bit, and he goes, because I'm not broke. Like he kind of like nods to that, and she laughs, and I thought that was so cute. But he was so understanding of her, and he did overhear her sing one time, the very first time that the whole viewing audience and anybody hears her sing. It's like halfway through the movie, and it is amazing. It is this amazing moment that I totally want to talk about later, but he hears her sing, and that's why he's like, okay, you got to come in, you got to sing at this jamboree for us. And she's like, I'm not ready. Don't even ask me to do it. I'm not ready. So what is the point that like gets her over some of her fear, where they talk about having faith over fear? How does she get to that point?
To me, it seemed like, again, it was almost kind of like she was forced to. Just like
she kind of forced it.
She just had to do it, and she had to just trust God and trust the gifts that she had, and step up, because So, what was the name of the young lady?
Stella,
yes. Who was also a very good singer, and have to plug. So she was in another Lifetime movie last year, the Clark sisters biopic. She played Jackie Clark Chisholm, so the oldest of the Clark sisters in that movie. So so very strong singer, good actress, and I loved that movie. It was like amazing. So
that's good.
But anyway, Stella loses her voice.
Totally. Yeah. Keep going. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Stella loses her voice, and they're like, okay, so who's gonna do this? Like, who's gonna lead the choir? We need somebody. And she and Olivia, well, Ashton goes to Olivia and says, it's time. You have to,
Yes.
we're depending on you. We need you. And she's very reluctant, very afraid, and he kind of continues to encourage her. And I think, and he does it in an affirming and kind of validating way. And I think that, and he did it in a way because because she'd already kind of shared her trauma and why she was, had been so reluctant. She said, and he told her, it's time for you to step out and prove that director wrong.
Yes.
You have this gift. I mean, and he kind of acknowledged, like, I've heard you. I know how gifted you are. And she finally is able to step up, and she did
She
a wonderful.
Oh my gosh, when she comes into that jamboree, and she looks amazing. For one, her dress, her jewelry, her hair, like you can tell she's just blossomed as this stepped into this lead pastor role. Once she decides to step out in faith, she was amazing. Like, not only her voice and the support that she gives back to her congregation and the people who she starting to love. I mean, she looks amazing. She looks the part too, she's just this goddess, just totally looking the part. But there's this montage that it was kind of cool, because the montages, there was like maybe 3 montages in this whole movie. They were so purposeful. They really they moved the story along so well. The music over them was just amazing. She actually sits down at the piano and plays the song, "The Greatest Gift Is Love." And it's this montage of her remembering all of these things the congregants have done, warmly welcomed her, helped her, supported her already within this month time that she's only been there. And it's almost like she's motivated to say, okay, it's time for me to love them back. They have ministered to me, even though I was called here to minister to them. And now I can do this for them and minister to them and love them back. So I was like, yes, thank you. I'm so glad that she got to that point. And it just was an amazing, amazing ending. The jamboree wasn't a contest. It wasn't anything like that. So we could just end on that high note of this great performance of "O Come All Ye Faithful," and sealed with a kiss and happily ever after. I mean, it was just, it was great.
Yeah, and so that "O Come All You Faithful" definitely sounded like Kirk Franklin's style.
Really? Okay.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
I really love that her parents kind of came and surprised her at the jamboree and saw like how into her performance they were. I especially her mother, so proud to see her fully step into her gifts, and because you could see that her mother was always kind of encouraging her and pushing her. And so I thought that was great that they were able to come in at the end.
That was so great. Okay, let's talk about these. Let's talk characters if you want to say a few other things about some of the supporting roles, because there was such a good cast of characters and the acting was so good, and we know all of these are professional actors, but just it just seemed so natural, their community that they developed. And one, I have to say, the men in this movie were such amazing men. There
Mm.
was like Ashton, Brother Carl, Pastor Bird, her father. All of these men were so gospel-centered, so servant-hearted. They were
Mhm.
kind, they were encouraging with their words, they were supportive, but they were such amazing men.
Mhm.
These
Yeah.
all four of these roles, didn't you think?
Yes, and one thing that, and I think, and I'm glad that they acknowledge this about how, a lot of times, a man um, can struggle when your partner, your wife, is kind of the one that's in the forefront. And you saw how, these all these men had like a great amount of like self-confidence and kind of a centeredness in themselves, that they were able to kind of take a back seat and support their wives in their ministry. So,
Yeah.
starting with her father, kind of really
Yeah.
supporting her mother, who was the pastor and the
Yeah.
leader at the church. Even you saw that with Brother Carl
Mhm.
and Sister Ida,
Yeah.
and then of course to Ashton and
Mhm.
Olivia. So I thought that was really, an interesting way to play these relationships, and I think, it works well on Lifetime, because these are supposed to be about,
Right.
kind of pushing women forward, and and it's a good acknowledgement. And I think it was good that they acknowledged that
Yeah.
that's can be difficult for a woman that's in that in a position where she's the one in the forefront.
Yeah.
So
And different than what maybe culture might say, these four men specifically, well, I'll just say three because we didn't meet Pastor Bird, we just heard so much about him. But
mhm,
these three men specifically, their support of these women did not make them weak.
right,
It
exactly.
really made them very strong. They had such strength of character,
Yeah, they were
and
like rock for
yeah,
so
I
you
love that.
know how being a supporter of someone does not make you, necessarily subservient
Yeah.
or weak. It can attest to your strength, because they know that that you have their backs, and
Yes.
they can just, focus on doing what they've been
Yeah.
called to do.
Yeah. And you know what? Even each pastor, I mean, my husband's a pastor actually.
Mhm,
So I'm a pastor's wife, and there's like the pastor needs to not be the pastor all the time.
mhm,
Like he is the pastor, and Pastor Olivia, she is the pastor, but she needed those dates with Ashton where he said, "Okay, you're just Olivia.
mhm,
You're just Olivia. Let's play, let's have fun, let's do this checkerboard or this chess, big chess thing." And she just like you could tell like she was like, whew, she needed that.
mhm,
It's not
exactly.
like turn off and become someone else, but it's just like acknowledging this other side.
Mhm,
You're just Olivia here,
mhm.
you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree. So I definitely appreciated seeing that,
Mhm.
and seeing kind of like that, not being intimidated by
Yeah,
being with a powerful
yeah,
woman. So
yes, yes. Yeah, these men were awesome. They were amazing. Ladies, find you a guy like Ashton and Brother Carl and her dad, because these are real men. Um, so I loved that. I loved all these supporting characters. We have to talk about the music. We
mhm,
have to talk about the music, and we can wrap up talking about this, but the music itself was so essential to the storyline.
mhm, yes.
It was so gorgeous. There was about 11 maybe even more songs. Maybe I miscounted, but so this movie was filled with music, filled with worship.
Mhm.
Um, what did you think about the music? Was it a
So I
true
mean,
representation?
from the first song where they were at like her parents' church, and
Yes.
had her mother leading the choir, I was like, okay, I'm feeling this. I was like, I was
Yes.
clapping, I was up. I was like, yes,
Yes.
I'm in church right now. I feel like I'm in
So
praise
glad about
and
that.
worship right now. So, you know,
Now that
and
was Take Everything to God in Prayer, that
yeah,
song. That was a
yeah,
beautiful song of worship and in church. So
right.
okay, keep going. Talk about the music.
And then and of course, like I said, so that was my favorite, because
Okay.
they did a really good job of kind of opening up
Yeah.
like, okay, this is going to be like some real gospel music. Okay.
Mhm.
And then of course, my second favorite was probably, of course, the finale with "Oh, O Come All You Faithful."
Yeah.
You had Ashton sing, like, what was it, 2 songs at least.
Mhm.
Had at least 2 songs from Olivia, and like you said, I mean, we don't hear Olivia sing until, like, the movie's more than halfway over before we hear Olivia sing.
Right.
And the first time that we hear her sing is like in that church by herself, and Ashton comes in and overhears her. It was a really great moment. And I think it's good because the whole time, you keep hearing about her voice and how beautiful it is, and how you have your mother's voice and all this stuff. And so you're like waiting, like, when are we going to hear her voice?
Right.
And so they did a great job of, like, not disappointing us with being, or making us be underwhelmed by her. Also,
She
go
just
ahead.
blew us out of the water with that one. So I'll interrupt you for a second, but talk about that. I want to talk about this song, "I Surrender All."
Mhm,
At this point, halfway through the movie,
mhm,
she is just so doubting the call of the Lord to come to this church, to be the lead pastor. She has failed so many things,
mhm,
and for sure she made this big mistake and is disappointing a lot of people about this church, this
mhm,
choir entry. She feels like she's done,
mhm,
and she has this moment by herself. Well, she thinks it's by herself in her chapel, where she is just like singing, and it's a prayer. It
right,
really
right,
is this prayer that just pours out of her, like, I cannot fix this. I
mhm,
need to give this to you. You need to take this over, and I surrender all. All
mhm,
to Jesus I surrender. All to him I freely give. And you
mhm,
could feel it. You could feel
mhm.
that she finally was gonna trust him,
Yeah,
and that she was gonna, like, give her gift to him. Like, I surrender this gift. I've been holding too tightly to this and keeping it from you and the people. Like, even that she was gonna surrender. Like, honestly, I was crying. I was like, this is the most beautiful moment. It was for nobody else but the Lord and her. And
mhm.
I was like, I love this. I love this movie.
And I think that was pretty much the only way we were going to hear her sing, is if she's by herself. And because the moment was so poignant, I think, that really helped us, really kind of get on board with her. And
Yes.
we want to see you,
Yeah.
surrender this gift to God, and
Right.
and um uh, and and not hold, and like you said, not hold on to it or be afraid.
Yeah.
Um, and what I really liked was, they kept, referring to Hebrews 13:6. That's
Yes.
kind of a theme, and it was, the Lord is my helper, I won't fear. What can man
Yeah.
do to me? So she was, and part of her was, was that she was so afraid of what other people would think about disappointing people, about letting
Yes.
down, about not measuring up in
Yeah.
the people. And so when she, singing "I Surrender All," it's like, now she's, she's in the, or at least she's starting to, like,
Mhm.
really put her faith in God, and
Yes.
not worry as much about people, but really, following what has been
Yeah.
placed inside of her. So I really appreciated that.
I do too. And to see that private moment between her and the Lord in prayer, was so beautiful. Even, like, you don't think you think the pastor's always good with God. They always have that faith. They always have that trust. But no, the pastor's human too. They need those moments where they are going to resurrender and reassess their situation and confess that they messed up, you know.
Right.
So that I loved that moment for her. Like you said, that made me I was on board now. I'm like, all right, Pastor Olivia, this is good. We're going up from here because you're in a good place now with
Mhm.
the Lord, with yourself. So that was great. And the other song that I thought was really important for her character development through the movie was "Go Tell It on the Mountain,"
Mhm.
where she, at the beginning of the movie, she packed up her life. She's commissioned off to this new church, and it's a kind of a song over, go tell it on the mountain, but you could tell she's going.
Mm-hmm.
But then about 3/4 of the way in the movie, maybe halfway or something, I forget when it was, but she's in that moment where she's like, I can't do this anymore. And her new church choir sings that. And
Mm-hmm.
Stella really looks at her and sings that to her, basically, like as an exhortation and an encouragement to her soul, like, go tell it on the mountain. Like, you have a job to do here. You can do this. And so I thought that was kind of cool how they brought that back, kind of like this song for her again. Go tell it on the mountain was really important, I think, for her development.
And if we're going to continue with the music a little bit, so we had a couple of songs from Stella, and we had that first song, like her first, message, where they had poor brother Carl trying to direct this choir, and Stella was just trying to do way too much.
Way too much. What was it? It was like, I'd rather have Jesus than silver and gold, or something like that.
Which is one of Kirk Franklin's songs from the 90s, from before it was like when he was a little bit more traditional gospel. When he with Kirk Franklin and the Family, that's one of his bigger hits from like I think the early 90s, like
okay. Yeah.
95, around there.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then we hear how much better Stella sounds when Ash is directing the choir, because she's not letting her do all the crazy stuff that she was doing that first song. That was kind of fun.
Honestly, I was so shocked that first one that the whole choir sang. I was like, oh no, are they bad? Like, this is gonna be quite the storyline. But they really, really
they just needed a good director. That's what they just needed, a good director to keep them together. Because once Ashton started directing, they were much better.
Much better. They had much more just kind of a cohesive sound, and that was so much better. But yes, keep going. What other songs stood out to you there?
I do have one little critique, and that is, I wish that there had been a little bit more live singing. Because I feel like pretty much all of the singing was in the studio, and they were like lip syncing. Yeah. And so, I'm not sure like the acoustics of the different places they were, or how loud it was outside, or whether or not they were like able to do live singing.
Okay.
But these movies, when they have at least some live. But but other than that, like I still enjoyed the music.
Yes.
And I think it was, we've seen a couple movies this year where the mixing was not really what it needed to be, and this one was much better than a couple movies that we've seen this year.
Good. I'm so glad. This one needed to be. I mean, it has Kirk Franklin's name on this movie, Kirk Franklin's Gospel Christmas. I mean, you expect a high standard when it comes to this. So I'm really glad. I'm glad about that it wasn't so canned, but you wanted more live singing, you said. Yeah, I can see that. Well, we did have Kirk Franklin make an appearance via video before the Winter Jamboree.
Mm-hmm.
Just congratulating Genesis Baptist Church and saying, I can't wait to collaborate with you. And I'm like, ooh, do we have a sequel coming? Like, let's, I want more of this great choir.
I would not be averse to it. I would not be averse at all.
No, me neither. So, yes, I mean, great writing, wonderful music. The cast was fantastic. The acting was good. Just the costuming was beautiful. Her whole wardrobe was like, oh, yes, that's okay. I'm going to look for a red blouse. Okay, I'm going to, like I'm taking notes here on her wardrobe even. And the storyline was great. Like all of that I just said. I mean, that just made for a great movie, in my opinion, a really great Christmas movie, specifically because I miss going to church in these movies. I love Christmas movies. They're heartwarming, they're joyful, they're fun, they're family oriented. They have great messages of community and joy and hope. But I love when we can get spiritual. And I love when we can when we can go to church and have this be an authentic story of faith. I love when we can say the name Jesus at Christmas time because this is his season. Like it's like why we don't need to water that down here. Right? So I thought they did a great job at that.
Did they sing Jesus is the reason for the season in this movie? I think they did, and that's one of Kirk Franklin's songs. That's one of Kirk Franklin's songs. So
yeah. And Christ in Christmas. What was that one? You got Keep Christ in Christmas, or They Need to Know That Christ is Christmas is the song that Ashton sang, which was great too. So I mean, I was all in on this movie. If we take Ashton's life motto, I was all in. I'm a 5 out of 5 on this one. What did you rate it here, Thaddeus? Personally,
I'll give it like 4.25. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think I would have liked a little bit more live singing. I think the story is very engaging. Like I said, I enjoyed the cast and pretty much everything. There was just, I don't know, it just didn't have, there was something that I couldn't quite go to like love. So I'm like, this is like a very strong like for me. a very strong like.
Yes. Well, we'll take that. Sometimes the ones who like you already knew that you loved Kirk Franklin's music and ministry, and he already had such an impact on you that sometimes that can be a little bit of a barrier to going all in on maybe another project like this of his. But
I want more. I like.
Yay! Good.
It's a very strong like. This is like as close to love as you can get without quite getting to love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's great. I want more too. I think that they should definitely bring more. If you are a loyal Hallmark fan and don't venture over to the other network and watch Lifetime, I would say find this movie. This is a very good movie.
It's definitely a strong recommendation to watch this movie. If you pick one Lifetime movie, I do think that this is the best, at least of the Lifetime Christmas movies that I've seen. I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen, I've seen more than half of the ones that they've made this year, and this is the best of the Christmas movies that I've seen. So.
I agree. I totally agree. This is so great. Okay, any last words? Any last thoughts about Kirk Franklin, Gospel Christmas?
I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad that they did not shy away from the faith elements, and I was like, and it can be done. This movie shows that you can actually, tell a story for a faith-based audience that, I don't think that it was so much that it would like overwhelm someone that wasn't necessarily faith-based, because they kept it, they still had a strong story, and they really tied it into the character and who they were as a person. I hope that Kirk Franklin does more movies or Hallmark movies, whatever, that they let, and that they continue to allow him to, you can tell that his hand was in that music, that sounded like Kirk Franklin's music. So I look forward to more. I hope that they bring in more gospel artists. For these types of movies. I think that it's perfect for artists to come in, especially Christmas. I think they should
especially.
So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed talking about this movie with you.
Yes.
And I hope that those listening, have seen the movie and enjoyed it. And if you're listening and you haven't seen it, like I said, I give you a strong recommendation to go ahead and watch this movie. It was really good.
Me too. Yes, thank you. I echo everything Thaddeus just said. So go and find this movie and watch it. It's also a great romance, like we were saying too. So if that's kind of your bent on these movies, then like it is mine, then you'll appreciate just that whole cohesive story that Courtney Richard and Kirk Franklin gave us, and everyone involved in the project. So thank you to Lifetime. Thank you to Kirk Franklin. This was so much fun. Yes, Thaddeus, thank you for being on. I love talking with you. Where can people find you on social media?
Let's see. So I don't really have a very strong presence, but if you become a patron of the Hallmarkies podcast, you can talk to me in the patron group. because I am part of that. You will see me at pretty much, most of the watch-alongs that they do.
Yes.
I try to make it out for those where we get to talk and, talk to the talent behind these movies. So, that's probably the best way to get in touch with me personally.
Right. Well, if you want more Thaddeus, then become a patron of the Hallmarkies podcast. And you too can be in these watch-alongs and in our Facebook chat group, which we love being in, and potentially a guest on the podcast with us. So that'd be great. Well, come over to Instagram and find me at Hallmark Comics, and I'd love to have you follow me and interact with me there. Definitely leave a review on iTunes if you're listening there, and a rating and a comment on the YouTube channel if you're watching us talk about this movie. We want to know what you thought of this movie. What worked for you? What didn't? What was your favorite song? What was your favorite moment or quote, because it was so quotable and so good. We want to know what you thought about a Kirk Franklin's Gospel Christmas from Lifetime. So thanks everyone for joining us. We will be back with more Hallmark content and a lot of other content actually out there for covering your Christmas entertainment. So we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.